Hello, sir. How are you? Just to introduce myself, I'm Joseph. I'm diplomatic reporter from Manila Bulletin. Last year, we were able to go to Israel and also to see first. Like we toured Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and then the southern part.
Yeah, so I'm Ben. I'm the Deputy IDF International Spokesperson.
Okay. So right now we know what's happening, especially after the February 28th attack. Maybe can you just tell me about the current situation here there in Israel, and are the attacks, especially coming from Iran, still ongoing?
So the attacks are ongoing. We started this Operation Roaring Lion, last Saturday. It's a joint operation with the United States Armed Forces, and the primary goal is to remove an existential threat on the state of Israel and a threat on the United States and the entire region. And that is the military capabilities that the Iranian terrorist regime has. They, in response, have been firing ballistic missiles, UAVs, at Israel, at Israeli civilians, but not only, on the entire Gulf, on European countries, and that goes to show you exactly what kind of terrorist regime they are.
But Israel right now, there are still missiles from Iran that you guys are intercepting.
Yeah. There's been a decrease over the last week and a half since the operation started. We've systematically targeted their ballistic missile array, whether it be their weapon storage facilities, whether it be their launchers, whether it be their command and control centers, in order to try to remove that threat long term, but also short term to make sure that they have less of a firing capability against us. But yes, they're still firing. Israeli civilians are still waking up in the middle of the night going into bomb shelters. There's been direct impacts. They've fired a lot of the in stark violation of international law. They fired a lot of cluster bombs actually at directed at civilian areas. So what happens then is they fire a missile and then it splits into a lot of smaller bombs that then fall in civilian areas. So yes, we're still experiencing Iranian fire, and by the way, also experiencing fire from the Lebanese front by the Hezbollah terrorist organization, which is an Iranian proxy. Overnight they fired over 200 rockets at Israeli civilians, specifically Israeli civilians in the north. And again, those are rockets that the Iranian terrorist regime funded, and that's rockets that were fired because Hezbollah wants to support the Iranian regime. So we're meeting it on all fronts, but we're protecting ourselves. We do our best to manage that situation on the home front while also targeting and attacking our enemy's military capabilities.
US President Donald Trump recently said that he wasn't pleased with the negotiations, with the progress of the nuclear negotiations with Iran. But meanwhile, both Iran and Oman, the mediator, said there was actually progress in the talks. Um, what really prompted Israel and US to attack Iran?
Well, look, the story of this operation is very simple. All right, you have a terrorist regime that for 47 years has declared very openly death to Israel, death to America, and that they want to, create this large extremist regime and target other countries. All right, and so when we go into this operation, we understand that they're building up their military capabilities because they want to get to a point where other people or other countries will not be able to protect themselves from their military capabilities. And it comes on a few fronts. So first, they have this conventional shield that they've built, right? Ballistic missiles, they're looking to build, we understand from intelligence that they were looking to build up thousands more of ballistic missiles in the next few years, which, is intended to challenge aerial defense arrays in Israel and in the entire Middle East. And those conventional weapons, ballistic missiles, UAVs, are intended to protect that inner layer of their nuclear program. So we targeted and we struck together with the US in last June their nuclear program, and we struck it significantly. Right, we were able to bring them back, but what we've seen over the last year is them fortifying and hiding a lot of that nuclear infrastructure so that they can rebuild that program moving forward. And so those two threats, going along with their proxy network that they continue to fund and they continue to bring weapons to and try to enforce on Israel's borders, we understand that that's a threat that we can't allow to keep building itself forward. So we go for this operation, not because if we're talking about last June, we're talking about a ticking time bomb, right? We're talking about, that nuclear program where they're just weeks away from being able to get to a nuclear bomb and we have to stop that at the threshold. Now we're talking about removing the bomb altogether, right? We don't want to go to war in another year or in another 2 years. And so that's why we're doing this operation to take away those military capabilities.
So can I clarify? Because there was a 12-day war with Iran before last year. So even before, even after you attack Iran that time, there's still progress in their nuclear building
So what
efforts,
we've
right?
seen specifically in the last year, just to kind of lay it out for you, right? So a nuclear program has two main aspects, right? It has the center of the nuclear bomb, which is, the uranium they're enriching, and it also has the weapon, the surrounding weapon. So last June when we targeted both of those parts in different ways, right? We targeted their main nuclear facilities where they enrich uranium. And we also targeted, those same nuclear scientists that were building up that bomb capability, that surrounding weapon. That's a secret program that they hid from the world, but we knew because of intelligence that was happening behind the scenes. And those two things together made us understand that they were moving towards a nuclear bomb. We significantly hurt those programs. And then what we've seen over the last year is them fortifying and trying to rebuild the infrastructure so that they can build those programs back up. So that's not to say that they've gotten to the same point that they were last year. We struck them significantly, but the intent at the very basic level to rebuild their nuclear program moving forward and the progress in the conventional weapons capacity that's intended to protect that intent and that nuclear program moving forward is enough of an understanding for us to know that they still have that vision of destroying Israel, destroying America, harming other allies in the region at the front of their mind, and they're progressing there, and that's why we're operating.
Okay. Iran's former supreme leader Ali Khamenei was already killed, but now there's already a new supreme leader, Ayatollah Mujtaba Khamenei. So, and Tehran showed no sign of stopping or yielding. What now is your goal? I mean, and how easy or hard is it achieving your goal?
So look, war is never easy. I will say we've made very significant progress over the last week and a half together with our partners in the United States. And that goal, as I described it earlier, is very clear. All right. It's to take that ticking time bomb and to make sure that it's not there. And the way we're doing that is by taking away military capabilities. Right. So the first 100 hours of the operation were the first stage where we take that attack, not only eliminating Khamenei, the supreme leader, but also 40 other senior military commanders in the opening minutes. And over the first 5 days, we operated on a few different fronts. We created aerial superiority for the United States and Israel in Iranian skies, right, by taking away aerial defense capabilities, radars, land to air missiles, so on and so forth. And the other thing that we did over those first 100 hours is to target their ballistic missile array and their command and control centers. Once we finish that first strike, now what we have to do is deepen the deterioration of their military capabilities. So how are we doing that? We're striking in Tehran almost every day, command and control capabilities. We're striking weapons manufacturing capabilities that they're using to build up those ballistic missiles. We continue to hunt down those ballistic missile capabilities, whether it be launchers, operatives, so on and so forth. And we're continuing to strike other infrastructure in the Iranian regime has a very large military network. And they have multiple armies, they have, an air force, a navy, and what we're doing is we're systematically taking away from those military capabilities so that, a year down the line, 2 years down the line, even if they try to build themselves back up, they won't be the same strategic threat that they are now.
How do you make sure that you are minimizing the damage to the civilian population? I mean, considering that you're also attacking the capital city.
So look, Israel here and the United States also are very, very different from the other side of the equation. And I think that, when we're telling the story of this operation, we're telling a story of good versus evil, and it becomes most clear when you're talking about the evacuation of civilians and the protecting of civilians, right? So what we do is we evacuate civilians, in areas where we know that they may be in harm's way. We take a lot of precautions before strikes, a lot of times giving up the element of surprise, right, in order to protect civilians, whether it be examining targets before we strike them, whether giving preliminary warning, everything that we can do within the capacity that we have, we do. Because we have one goal, and that's to protect civilians, right? Protect civilians in Israel, and that's why we're taking away these operational capabilities, but also to make sure that no civilians or lives are lost. And we see every civilian life lost in the construct of war as a tragedy. On the other hand, you have a terrorist regime, and our intelligence shows this concretely, that is intentionally targeting civilian targets. When they're firing missiles at Israel, they're not saying, "All right, we'll fire in the area of a military target, and worst case, it'll fire civilians, and then we'll apologize because we don't want to target civilians." No, behind the scenes, they want to kill civilians. It's a terrorist regime with terrorist tactics. They want their weapons to hit civilian homes. They want to terrorize civilians. So that's the very big difference. We do our best. They do their worst.
Israel has been in continuous war since October 7, 2023. Well, that was with Hamas and now with Iran. Can you sustain it militarily and economically?
Look, we have no choice, right? We're talking about a sovereign nation that's trying to protect its own civilians. We have an Iranian terrorist regime, that's built itself up for 47 years to try to target us. And not, if that's not enough, they've built up all their proxies on our borders, right? October 7th starts with an Iranian-funded terrorist organization, breaking into Israeli territory and killing and murdering and raping Israeli civilians. As the war has gone on, we've been against Hezbollah, we've been against the Houthis, we've been against the Assad regime before they fell, and all of those proxies were funded by the Iranian terrorist regime. So, we keep going because we can't allow for a reality like the reality that existed on the 6th of October 2023, where that threat is imminent and posed upon our civilians. So we're going to keep operating for as long as it takes to remove that threat on our civilians.
Both sides, both Israel and Iran, are firm in their stand of hurting each other, let's say hurting each other or destroying each other. So now who could negotiate or who could mediate the talks between the two countries? I mean, between the two sides, so this war can be done.
So I'll leave mediation and political conversations for the political echelon. I'm a military spokesperson. I speak for the military operation. I just want to say, we're operating to take away military capabilities. They want to destroy us as a country. There's a difference between the two things.
Okay. President Trump recently said that war could be ended anytime soon. Does the Israeli military share the same pronouncement?
So look, nobody wants long wars, right? Everyone wants to protect our civilians and to do it in minimum time. The Iranian terrorist regime has a lot of military capabilities. We work in very close coordination with our partners in the United States as it pertains in general and as it pertains specifically to this operation. We're lockstep. We're talking every day. We're coordinating our targets. We're coordinating where we're striking, and we're going to keep doing that moving forward. I can't speak to a specific time frame, but I can tell you that we're going to go as long as it takes to get the job done.
The Iranian president just said that he laid out the conditions how to end the war. It's one of some of them. They are acceptance of Iran's indisputable rights, payment of reparations, and firm international obligation to prevent this aggression from recurring. Would you yield to this demand, or I mean, what's your comment on this?
So again, I'm a military spokesperson, but I can tell you one thing. All right, an Iranian terrorist regime that terrorizes the entire region, and just in the last few months has terrorized the people inside, isn't exactly posed to make demands that the from the world to stop, quote unquote, Israel and the United States. We're operating against a regional threat. They've proved that over the last week and a half as they fired all over Gulf countries and over Europe, right? This is a story of good versus evil. So, I can't speak to what happens on the political echelon, but I can tell you that we're going to keep operating until we achieve our military goals.
So, what more do we expect from Israel or maybe from the US in the coming days or weeks?
So we're going to continue operating against those same military capabilities that I spoke about, right? So I won't reveal exactly what we're going to do. Don't want to reveal any future plans to the enemy, but I can tell you that we have a concrete plan that's to take away those military capabilities. Not just firing everywhere, but knowing exactly where we're targeting, what we're striking, and how we're striking to slowly deteriorate, or quickly as possible deteriorate, better said, their military capabilities. And we're going to keep doing that over the coming days. Us where we're doing it, and the United States Armed Forces where they're doing it, in order to know that that loaded gun isn't pointed to our head anymore.
Okay, so that being said, in the view of the Israeli military, how soon can you achieve that?
So again, I'm not going to give any specific time frame. Nobody here wants long wars. That's not our goal. Our goal is to take that military capability and remove it, and we'll go for as long as it takes to do that.
Okay, so one last question. Do you have any message for those, especially you belong to the Israeli military, you're the spokesperson. So do you have any message for those people, for civilian population, for those who are really concerned about the spillover of the war?
So I'll make one thing very clear. The IDF, and I know the same can be said for the United States Armed Forces, do not want to harm civilians. Every loss of civilian life is a tragedy, and we see it that way, within the construct of war, and we see it that way in general, right? When the Iranian terrorist regime murdered tens of thousands of civilians just a few weeks ago, for simply exercising their right to protest, we see those civilian lives lost as a tragedy as well. we're operating, within the constructs of international law to take away a military threat, a threat that is not only posed to our people in Israel, but is posed to the entire region and is posed internally to the people of Iran. And we're going to keep going until we remove that military threat. We don't want to see any civilian lives lost. We're doing our best to remove any threat to civilian lives, and we're going to keep going as long as it takes.